my name is Tori, and I'm doing my vocabulary lesson that I've already done in the field. So, my standard is determine the meaning of the general, academic, and domain-specific word or phrase in a text relative to a 4th grade topic or subject area. My vocab words were over Percy Jackson and the Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. The materials I used for this lesson were the Mimeo board and Elmo, the video for Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, the vocabulary list, the matching card activity, and the worksheet. And they had a pencil for the first and last activity. So the students were in whole group for the motivation activity. For activity 1, they were in a small group or pairs, and for the last activity was individual work. The technology I used was the computer, the Mimeo board, and the Elmo. For my differentiated special needs student, the students will have the vocabulary words already filled out for the first activity. For the activity 1, the students will be put into a more advanced group, so they would have a higher person to help them, guide them to find matches. And for activity 2, they will be able to use their word list where the other students were not allowed to. The students in the past have learned about comprehension strategies to help understand the novel. They are presently learning today vocabulary terms to help them understand the text better, and for the future they will work on the learning about author's purpose of the same story. The Gardner's multiple intelligence I did within the lesson were visual and oral linguistics. I want the students to at least master an 85% on the activity. This lesson took about 45 to 50 minutes. We did use the text Percy Jackson with a Lightning Thief. We did not physically use it, but the words came from the text. I will assess the students in activity 2, but visually and orally observe them in the motivation in activity 1. My teacher objective will ensure that the class can analyze and understand the vocabulary words well enough to define an answer with each word. My student objective will be to analyze and understand each vocabulary term to help them understand the story by the end of the lesson. I actually did this in the field last Wednesday, and so I will kind of tell you how the students reacted on each activity, what they said and what they did. Our first activity is the fill in the blank. I had this laid out on the Elmo and projected it out, and on the Mimeo board you can physically write, so I just wrote each definition out instead of writing it with a pencil. What I did was I gave all of them this blank sheet, and we went over them as a class so everybody would understand in case they do not know, in case they missed a day, because they were on chapter 6 when I started the lesson. So we did go over each individual word. For Dionysus, the god of wine, and ritual is the god of wine and ritual madness. The students said that he was Mr. D and the director of the camp, but I wanted them to also know he was a god of wine. For number 2, Poseidon, all the students wanted to say he was one of the big 3. You know, the big 3 were Poseidon, Hades, and Zeus. And they could name me those big 3. Those were the 3 they really knew. And, but I asked him, I was like, well, who is he? And he's like, they're like the god of sea. And I was like, okay, whose father is he? And they said Percy. Then I asked him who Ares was, and they said that he was the god of war. And I said, okay, name me somebody from the book whose kid he was, who had a kid, like one of his kids. And they said that Clarice was one. Then I asked them who Hades was, and they said that one of the big 3 again. And I said, okay, what god is he? And they said the god or ruler of the underworld. And I said, okay, good. Y'all aren't to that part yet, but y'all do know that. And they said yes. Okay, so number 5 is Zeus. And I asked who Zeus was, and they said one of the big 3. And I said, okay, who is he? And they said the god of all gods. And I said, okay, does he have a child? And they're like, yes, Talia, but she is now a tree. And I said, okay, good. Okay, and then I asked who Athena was. And they said that it was Annabeth's mom. And I said, okay, good. But who is she? And they said, the goddess of wisdom. And I said, good. And then I asked them what a mortal was. And they said, somebody that can die. And I said, yes. I said, so are we mortal or are we immortal? And they said, we are mortal. I said, okay, good. And then I said, what does immortal mean then? And they said that you cannot die. And I said, who is immortal? And they said, gods. And then I asked them what a demigod was. And they said a demigod is half human, half God. I said, okay, what is a human? Mortal or immortal? And they said mortal. So I said, so he's half mortal, half, and they said God. I said, good. I said, name me a demigod. And, some of them said Annabeth, but most of the students said Percy, because the story is about him. And then the last one is a satyr. And I said, what is a satyr? And they said that Grover was a satyr. And that's the one thing they could tell me. Grover, Grover, Grover. And I said, okay, what is Grover? And they said he is goat and a human. I said, okay, is his lower part a goat or is his upper part? And they said he has legs like a goat and body of a human. I said, okay, good. So as we were going over these, we went over, it took us about 10 to 15 minutes. And they wrote in each one with their pencil. They wrote the definition that we wrote on the board. For the flashcard game, the students that were special need or needed help, I did go ahead and give them this list with the stuff pre-filled out. All the other students, I expected them to follow along and write down the words with me, because if I wrote them, they could write them. This is a flashcard game. It has 20 words. Well, it has 10 words and 10 words and 10 definitions. I did pre-cut them, and I had 10 groups. I had them each in a Ziploc baggie so the students could use them. And they laid them face down. So they laid them face down like this. And they laid them in 5 rows of 4. So, I explained the rules once I got them all laid out. I said, okay, so you flip 2 over. So they, flip 2 over. I said, do they match? So, like, say they flipped over Athena and God of Wine. And I said, well, is Athena and God of Wine a match? And they said, no. The God of Wine is Dionysus, and Athena is the God of Wisdom. I said, okay, good. So we put those back where we got them. I said, okay, now flip over 2 more cards. And they flipped over, so they flipped over Athena and God of Wisdom. I said, okay, is this a match? And they said, yes. So they would take this, but once you flip it, if it's wrong, you flip it back. I let the students play for about 15 to 20 minutes. The teacher had a timer in the classroom that she let me borrow, and we let them play. I think all the students just about had 3 rounds, which was really good because it got them learning the vocabulary words. And they had really, really fun doing that, I feel. And after we did that, I got the students to put the cards back in the baggie because I didn't want to leave a mess in the teacher's room. And I gave the students, made the students go back to their desk. And then I passed this out and told them to all lay it face down. So after we laid it face down, I told them, okay, now you're going to work individually without your vocabulary list. I said, you're going to flip it over, I said, and you're going to match the words, write the correct number to the meaning. So they wrote their names, and made sure they all had their name, and they wrote the date, and then they matched. So like Dionysus is the God of Wine, so they would put a 1 here. The teacher, I graded them for the teacher, and only 3 students did not get 100%. So I did fulfill my 85% goal on analyzing and understanding vocabulary terms. The students did really good overall, and I think the lesson went really, really well. The only thing I had a problem with was, for my reflect, was the students started getting a little antsy about the second or third time they played the game because they wanted to win. and other students were bragging about winning, and I told them we weren't there to win, we were there to learn vocabulary words. So I had to motivate the students to continue to play the game, the ones that weren't. They didn't get the most matches, but that was the only problem I had. Thank you.